So here we are, Fernando Hettiyadura. It is wonderful to have you on the podcast. Here we are talking about coaching and psychedelics.
Yeah, Yannick, thank you for having me. I see that you're creating lots of value with what you do, and also the direction that you're creating. It's like you were earlier saying, an intersection of two amazing fields. So this is a very important movement, and thank you for doing all the work you do, and I feel humbled to be here.
Thank you so much, Fernando. It's so lovely to start with gratitude. And the very first, we don't know each other well. We had a very short conversation because Jan from our podcast team, he said, I said, well, can we have some more ICF affiliated coaches on the podcast? Because it seems that a lot of our guests, they come from the psychedelic field, not necessarily from the coaching field. And then they kind of acquired some coaching skills, and now they're combining them. And I was craving to talk to more people who are really grounded in coaching, and then started exploring psychedelics. And Jan found you, and then we talked, and I got really excited because you just embody this mindset of being an MCC coach. You know, you have that with you in the way that you listen, in the way that you engage. So I'm really keen to explore how you work, who you are, and how you experience the intersection. And talking about intersection, I obviously want to honor my fellow podcast host, Julia. Julia can't be here today. She's traveling. And it was a bit difficult over the summer to find a date between the three of us. So she said, please go ahead, do this one solo, so to speak. And so our thoughts go out to her. She's probably having an amazing time somewhere. And here we are. So, hey, Fernando, the way we usually start this is rather than reading a bio of some sort. I mean, you have an impressive body of work, but when you find yourself at a dinner party or at a gathering, perhaps with other coaches around, but I wonder how you tend to introduce yourself and your work to either coaches or not coaches.
Thank you, Yannick, and you're talking about MCC, and let's start there, if you don't mind, right? So, if I learned something about becoming an MCC, I learned make mistakes, take more risks, right? So that's the energy you're talking about. I think when we're able to take risks and make mistakes, there's nothing to worry about because we already have accepted our failure. So let's begin with that. And what a great question. If I'm going to introduce myself, which I do all the time. So usually what I say to someone is that I am a conversational storyteller. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people say, "Oh, okay, what's that? What's that about?" I mean, it's unconventional for a coach as an answer to what do you do. Tell me a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. So usually people ask me that, or they ask a specific question. So that gives me an opportunity to really have their attention, so that I can really share what I do, and I have their attention. Because often when we are in a space, now that we're talking to coaches, right? Often we are in a space that everyone is in a bit of a hurry to make a buck or make that connection very quickly or acquire a client or something like that. But if we are able to bring the person's attention to you truly, like when you said it's an unconventional way of, I think our work is unconventional to begin with, and also coaching is a new industry, right? Yeah. So this is the reason why I use an introduction like that. And to talk about what that truly means to me is that I find myself a being exploring this blue planet. And through this exploration as a being, I have the full freedom to do what I want to do. And this is something very important to me. And that freedom tells me that be of service to as many people as possible. So that brings me to the conversational element of what I do. And I think as a planet, we have a beautiful story to say. And as a universe, we have a beautiful story to say. and you tell me that story from your perspective, and I receive and I share my perspective of the universe. And when we do that, we find ourselves in the deepest places. So now to elevate what that truly means to me from a professional perspective is to bring conversation, be it coaching, therapy, associations, dissociations, name it. Bringing all of those valuable conversational elements, and then truly be curious about the story of the magnificent person in front of you. Magnificent person in front of you. So when we create a space for someone to be vulnerable, which requires you to be vulnerable, and then inviting that person to that space creates natural healing. And we call it spontaneous healing. So that's who I am. That's what I do as a being. Yeah, enjoying this beautiful blue planet and being of service to as many people as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to dig into that storytelling element a little bit further down the line, perhaps. I guess maybe right now, but in a different way. Could you tell us the story of how you got into coaching? Because I know there's some rich history way before you've gotten in touch with psychedelics. So I'd love to know a little bit about your journey into coaching. And then perhaps you can get into the part of the story where psychedelics enter that your professional life.
Yeah, certainly. Now it's I'm thinking where to start. I think Oman is a good place to begin. So I used to live in Oman before I moved to Thailand, and there was a time I was in learning and development to begin with, and also the training component, people development. So I was in this space, and I was always saw a dead audience in front of me after years of educating myself to be in a space. I want to develop people. That's what I thought. So I saw a dead audience in front of me. At the time, I didn't understand where the problem was. Actually, I didn't know I was the problem. Really, it wasn't the audience ever. I was trying to develop them. So at some point in that effort, at a very young age, actually, around 23, 24 years old, living in Oman, I felt that something is missing, that something had to fall into place. So at the time, there was that lack, that gap. So I went into dancing very strongly while keeping my job by the side. And through my dancing, I came across this amazing person called Benita Stafford Smith. And she had been my mentor from that moment until here. So when she came to my space, I started to see what it is to have true joy, freedom, and exude that love all the time. So I thought, I like the essence of this person. I want to find out what she does. So she was an MCC at the time. So I got to know her as a friend. So that's how I was introduced to the coaching world. So my very first step into the coaching world through ICF, and started my coaching educational and professional development journey. And through that journey, I started to see that the problem was me, because I was trying to develop people. I didn't know if they were ready or not. I didn't know that they had all the answers. So when I learned coaching, it just shook open my world. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I became very serious about learning about coaching, developing myself. And then to the level that I moved to Thailand with one-way ticket and small luggage from Oman to here with nothing, and didn't even know anyone, because I had this strong belief in myself, which enabled me to get to, through coaching, my own transformation. So I decided, right, I'm going to go live where I'm going to be celebrated. So I came here, and I feel I'm celebrated every single day, because I think now I have learned to celebrate myself. So that's how the coaching journey started. So
can I dig into that a little bit? Two questions. One, I wonder where you started learning about coaching. What were your first kind of points where you learned something? I mean, beyond your mentor, where I'm guessing there were conversations, but I wonder where you went to pick up coaching skills first. And then also, why Thailand? I can say a bit more of that question, but it's not known for its big coaching location. And I have a few clients from Thailand, and I know their struggle with how coaching is being perceived back there, which is not really in the facilitative, the client has the answer sort of way.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And well, right. So to answer your first question, how I started my coaching journey. I think, frankly speaking, coaching education is available everywhere. What is most important is that we find the right way of learning. I am a very learner who like to apply and learn by doing things. Mm-hmm. I like the adult-centric learning pedagogy. So, because of this reason, from the very beginning, when I looked at lots of different, I did different courses, but more than that, what I did was immediately applied what I learned, and I made a lot of mistakes from the very beginning. And then having guidance of my mentor, like now when I talk about my coaching journey, I can clearly go back and see that one question my supervisor asked, that one question my mentor asked, I feel were pivotal moments of my coaching career. Right. I would say I truly, frankly, gratify where I am to myself, frankly speaking, very honestly. And because I applied what I learned and I believed in myself and I got here.
Yeah. And so what drew you to Thailand at the time?
Right. Yeah. Why Thailand? The simple answer is that when I landed here in Thailand for the very first time in my life, I had goosebumps in my body. I had my body responding to the energy the moment I touched the ground. Now it might sound very metaphysical, and that's my reality. So I felt really, truly very grounded here. Just the very first few steps, people passing by, smiles, and I felt this connection immediately. And I came 7 times, of course, before I moved here, and I had to make sure that it wasn't like an overnight decision. I had a coaching, lots of clients in Oman. I had a dance school going in Oman, and I had a full-time job in Oman. So I had it was 3 years process before I moved here. But I found myself here. I had this trust in myself. I didn't necessarily looked at so much statistics in terms of like how much do coaches make here. And I knew that it is actually going to be challenging for me. I always like a challenge. And also I thought this is an opportunity for me to show what coaching really is. Now you said that coaching is perceived in different ways. So I thought this is my opportunity to contribute to this country and as a way of hosting me to how do I contribute by bringing in international knowledge, accreditations, and then sharing it here. And it's so far, it's working beautifully, actually. We have a beautiful coaching community here, and organizations in Thailand are becoming more and more open-minded, especially young generation is very interested in coaching. So we see growth in this region, and we are very proud. Yes.
Great. Oh, an exciting time. I'll tell, because I've got a client who was at the very early stages of becoming a coach, and I think he'll love to know that you exist.
I would be more than happy to be connected on it.
So how did psychedelics enter that picture? Because it sounded like not maybe the classic coaching journey, but you're still full of gratitude and spiritual person. When was that touch point? When did that come in?
I think like since I was very young, I think I had this curious nature to me since I was small. I remember my mom saying to me, I don't remember, but my mom told me that I would ask, how do our nails grow out of our fingers? And she would say, that's how it is. Then I would ask, but what is there like something that you squeeze and it comes out? What's the mechanism? So my mom had a very difficult time explaining things to me as a young child. So I always was very curious about the entire existence itself. I would often ask, like, why am I? Why do I exist? These kind of questions. And I grew up pondering on these questions growing up. And I met some amazing, soulful mentors, friends I pondered with these thoughts. And it brought me to higher grounds every time I thought about it. I felt it expanded my consciousness. And I think since you talk about coaching in my journey, I think one of the most beautiful things that happened to me was supposed to happen in this matrix of how everything moves in beautiful dance. I found coaching for a reason, because deeply inquiring within yourself, because that's exactly what I was doing. I asked a lot of questions outward and I couldn't find answers. So the deeper I looked within myself, the more answers started to show up. So that created a light in me that I could just see the beauty in every person, regardless. You even put the worst criminal in front of me, I'll find something lightful about that person, because there is like each and every one of us, and we are controlled by our circumstances and our hardwiring, right? So I had this awareness, and then I always asked when I was working with my clients, is it possible for me to give them a magic pill, create awareness and development? I asked this very often. I thought, is there some kind of like a magic wand? And then I started doing lots of research. I have done so many different types of therapy modalities, thinking, okay, this will do the job. This will do the job. And then so here came psychedelic therapy. So I looked deep into it, educated myself. And we usually have this in the psychedelic world. You may have heard that we say that it's the energy medicine that finds you, not you who finds the energy medicine. So I must say the energy medicine found me at the right time throughout my preparation process in this existence. And then when I went through it, I had all the answers. You know, all the questions that I have been asking about, including why I exist, how this is all possible, they all just splashed in front of my eyes. And to my surprise, it was all inside of me all along. And I just didn't know how to find it. I wasn't vibrationally ready to be able to vibrate in such frequency to enable that awareness that always had within myself. I found out that I'm the universe myself, in short. Right, when that happened, mind development professional and a storyteller and a conversationalist, you just stand up as a different person. Yannick, that day, I stood up just completely as a different person. It makes me emotional. Yeah, that was a very powerful moment of my life. I was like, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do with my life now, because I found out that I'm not expected to do anything. I can find my calling right here, right there. I knew this was my calling, and that dedicate, like from the next moment, I was just going into every possible way and starting to learn about how the medicinal possibilities and the clinical research, and also understanding the shamanic perspectives and looking at the metaphysical possibilities, because the experience that I went through is not something that I imagine possible to begin with. So there you are, immediately there is magic, not in the way that I thought, because we have been seeing illusions for a long time. We think magic is illusion. When we realize, no, magic is real. So when that happened to me, I was positioned in a really very good place, because I was very informed. I'm very conscious about the science, which means the clinical aspects of this medicine. At the same time, very much aligned and experienced deeply the energetic part, the shamanic or the metaphysical part of it. I think to create the maximum impact if we can combine these two worlds together, it's just the best place. And I found myself right there. And then just allow me to add this little bit, client after client. I have been working with some clients for a year, some therapy work, and then one session of new psychedelic intervention, done, healed, finished. All that 1 year's worth work. I mean, of course, that work was necessary in preparation. So the client after client, patient after patient. So I just, then you become the flow.
Yeah, it gets validated quite quickly that this is the right kind of work. Really interesting. You talk about magic and you talk about science, right? They're often not seen as very compatible. And so I wonder, like, you've experienced what you called the magic, and then you looked into the science. Actually, you started looking into the science and then experienced the magic. But science often aims to demystify what feels like magic. So I wonder to what extent you now understand what that magic was about for you, or is about in general, based on what we have researched. Because for me, it feels less and less magical, because I know how some of these processes work. Yes, this makes a lot of sense. So now it's less magic. I remember once my very first second marketing campaign, so to speak. I created some flyers I thought I could put out there and people might want to hang them up. And one of them said, "It's not magic." Because, coaching can feel like magic, but I feel that when you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and why it works, it feels less magical. And not less magical for the client. It's not less magic, but it is less magical because I now understand. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful question and very interesting analysis as well. I think I would also really like to talk about the science and magic and mystics, that side. At the same time, I think my expression of magic is for myself. That's where I would like to begin, truly speaking. And then if I am to share a little bit about what that means from a general perspective for understanding purposes, I would say that in your sharing, you said, why, how, right? So as human beings, we are very rational. We are hardwired to ask why, because that is related or connected directly to our survival, right? It comes from a place of fear. We have to know reasons or why. So when we ask all of those questions, we look at things and then we use a measurement, which is science, which can brief things and explain, which is a very important process, which is a very important measurement as human beings. It's the most extremely valuable innovation is for human beings, right? Being able to debrief things down and explain it so that we can heal cancer, right? We can help people with HIV. We can help a lot of people with science. So it's a very important measurement. At the same time, if we look at things at a molecular level, we can't really say why. For an example, at the most molecular level, an electron has a specific behavior when it is in its natural course, but it changes when you watch it, when you observe it. The moment the observer is placed, the behavior of the electrons start to change. Mm-hmm. That means we cannot explain why that is. Now, we can explain things around us easily and say, no, it's not magic. Yes, but that's someone else's definition of magic for themselves, right? So for me, when I look at things at the much grand level, like for an example, when we look at a black hole or a white hole, we call it a black hole and we give it a name and we say what we think about it, but it doesn't mean we know about it. So there's a lot of things that actually cannot be explained. For an example, if you look at the slime mold, which is a singular cell organism, which has no nervous system, which has no brain, but it can remember time, it can remember space, it can move in directions to find food in the fastest route, finding the fastest route, and store food for later use, and spread from place to place and grow up to many sizes, which means the intelligence just doesn't operate the way that we know all the time. And accepting the fact that this universe is more intelligent than me, and I am part of it. I am part of that intelligence. And when I'm connecting myself at that deep level, I see magic. I actually can't unsee magic. That's how I would say. Yes. However, that's my world. That's my world. But at the same time, in order to make sure our clients are safe, understanding neuroscience is important, which is science, because it helps us to understand how our brain operates at a very deep level. And understanding psychology is very important, because we then understand how we behave, what are our connections to the emotions, and how we operate at a deeper level. So understanding science is absolutely important. So the work that we do need to be backed up by science. It's not just walk in the dark and walk in the dark because we see the magic. It goes beyond that, especially if you want to be responsible for other people. So we need to come from a clinical background to understand what's the power of this wonderful energy medicine, and at the same time also not to ignore the true power of the mystics that enable an individual to heal. Yeah. Now, if you don't mind, Yannick, I would like to just add one more thing to it.
Sure.
You see myself, right? So I'd like to share my story a little bit with psychedelics. So I'm from Sri Lanka, and I come from a family who had enough. At the same time, now when I look back, I feel I want to give a hug to myself, to little Fernando. I want to look at myself and say, you did really well for where you really come from. So through this journey, from a very young age of my life, literally as a teenager, I started taking care of my family and educating my sister. Growing up, not as a victim in any way, with resilience, I want to share this. It's exactly what I want to do with my life. So I grew up like that. And then I went through my psychedelic very first experience with psilocybin. And then next morning I woke up and I felt this lightness. I naturally felt like I wanted to go out there. I wanted to breathe. For the very first time in my life after a very long time. Woke up second day, same thing. Third day, same thing. After a few days, I know that nothing can be in my body anymore. When it happened on the seventh day, I realized I didn't know all my life, even as a coach, even as a therapist, I didn't know there was a layer of depression that was covering my brain that I didn't know of. And it just was lifted like a veil lifted, just 1.5 grams of psilocybin. And I woke up next morning, clearing up all those conditioning and trauma, just like that. And then for the first time in my life, I realized, so this is how it is to live a normal life. Yeah, so this is how I experience magic.
Wow, it's so powerful. Thank you so much for that framework for magic, and also that visceral description of an experience that I think many people share, which is, it's so difficult to step outside of our own frame of reference, right? And that's why I think psychedelics are such a powerful mechanism for just, putting a whole fresh layer on it, so you forget your frame of reference, so you can experience something new. And I mean, how many other people are out there? I noticed that because I'm coming in from a positive psychology perspective, not from the therapy perspective. And what resonates with me is so many people don't see their own character strength. Somebody who's just naturally just so courageous and bold in a really positive way. It can also be overdone, of course, but like people who are really courageous, and that's one of the character strengths, they often don't recognize that for other people, that's really special. Somebody who's really humble and, thinking about what they're doing first and really taking their time to think something through before they take action, not jumping into action straight away. That's also a strength. And somebody who's like that, they often don't give themselves that kind of credit. So I think it's the same as you described with, I think there was a layer of depression, or there was something on my mind that I hadn't recognized, because for me, it's just normal. And once you take that away, even momentarily, it's like, wow, I cannot unexperience that. But what do I do with this experience now? And this doesn't need to be a psychedelic experience. This could be any form of experience. And I find that just so fascinating. So I wanted to underline it.
Yeah. And how about you, Yannick? Tell me a little bit about how you see being in this space, your experiences. Would love to hear a little bit about you as well.
Well, we have a whole episode on that. Is there something right now specifically? Because, I could probably talk for a long time, kind of trying to catch up with that.
Tell me about the magic aspect of it. How do you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting, right? Because as I was talking about the magic, I was asking the question, I'm like, ooh, I'm revealing so much about my mindset here as well. Because I find that particularly in the psychedelic realm, so to speak, a lot of people who move in that space, certainly a lot of people that work in that space and support others in that space, they tend to be very connected to that sense of magic, that spiritual world that I hear a lot of people talking about. Well, I asked the mushroom a question and then I got all the answers, or I went for a download. I went to an ayahuasca ceremony and I just linked into this higher intelligence, this, entity outside of us that is giving us somehow access to this intelligence that we don't have. And I don't think about it that way. I mean, that's not been my experience. And I know we often confirm what we already believe in. But I guess from that perspective, I'm more of a materialist. I do think that, psychedelics, as in the old Greek translation of, it's mind manifesting. It's your mind revealing itself to you. And I guess it's also my coaching mindset and my coaching attitude, my coaching lens, that's stepping into action and really believing that I'm already sitting in this. It's already inside of me. And of course, you can argue that, the intelligence, the outside is not really outside. It's also inside you. So no wonder you find the answers inside. But I do believe, and especially looking at this whole psychedelics mechanism through a coaching lens, I think that's still what I believe. You have these experiences and they give you access to a part of yourself that maybe before it was clouded. There's a fresh layer of snow on all of your kind of habitual ways of thinking and feeling. And all of a sudden you experience something new that allows you to go into lots of different directions. So many doors open during that time. And I don't think these are doors necessarily into the magical or into the spiritual, into the connecting to a deity of sorts or a higher intelligence. I do believe there's much higher intelligence. As you say, there's so many things we don't understand. There's so many processes that we don't have access to because we're human beings. And I think psychedelics open up a couple of pathways into understanding more, into picking up certain frequencies, into being able to see certain doors, or being able to step outside of our usual frame of reference, our usual biases. And I think that is what we often call magic. But my belief is that magic is something that we don't have access to understanding yet. And so we label it magic. I love your label. I think it's a somewhat different framework. But I think the kind of common understanding of magic is it's something that we don't understand. It works in ways that we don't have access to understanding, and we may never have, but that doesn't necessarily make it less real. We don't necessarily need to understand often how these things work. But what's so important is that we seek these kind of experiences and we get really curious about it. And I think a process of exploring something with this kind of curiosity that's helping us understand ourselves better, place ourselves better. We don't necessarily understand all the magic. Some will remain magic, but I do believe that any magic is understandable in some way. Maybe not for us right now as we're still evolving. If you don't have capacity to see color, then you won't understand. Like, colors will always stay magical. Some people who don't see color have an operation, they start seeing color. But I think there's certain ways of experiencing that human beings may never get access to. So there will always be mysteries and magic in the world. And that's so beautiful. It'd be so boring if we understood everything. So I think psychedelics are a wonderful way to step outside of that and stay really open and get really curious, particularly in the integration process, to make sense of what we've just experienced. And I think the demystifying is something that I think is really valuable. Like I said, I don't think we'll ever demystify everything and understand everything. That's an impossibility. But what made me a better coach, certainly, and helped a lot of other people be better coaches, better practitioners, is to understand the processes that were previously labeled magic. And now they understand why they work and they can do more of it. I think I'll pause there for a moment.
Beautiful, Yannick. Thank you. Yes. And how would you like me to come into this conversation next?
Yeah. So what I was curious about is because you're coming in with a background of dance, with a background of therapy, you got into coaching, you experienced psychedelics, you read into the science. So there's a lot of angles there. What I usually ask is that intersect. Why do psychedelics and coaching make sense together? And in your case, also, how does therapy play into it? Because you mentioned a couple of things that point to the therapeutic applications, right? It can be quite a therapeutic process to lift these veils, to heal suffering, to deal with trauma. Coaching is traditionally quite far away from that. It's more like moving forward to something, navigating, understanding, curiosity. So there's a line somewhere between coaching and therapy, which may or may not matter to you because you have training in both modalities. But why coaching in psychedelics? And do you see that line somewhere?
Yeah, this is an amazing question, Yannick. I think this is directly addressing the process of demystifying these things, right? I think this is a really good place for us to actually address that directly. So now when we talk about working in the coaching space, what we're truly doing is working with our alpha state of mind, which is the conscious state of mind, right? So that is our normal day-to-day operation mind. And we also understand that there's another layer of our mind, which we could call subconscious or unconscious mind, where there is a specific script that we have created for ourselves throughout our upbringing. All throughout our upbringing, from the day we were born, the day we were just experienced, or even during our the embryo stage, even during the inside of the womb. So when we look at this process of growing up, there's so much that we have become which we call conditioning, right? So all of this is under our normal conscious operation. So every time we do something, although we think we have that conscious control over what we do, we don't understand that it's always controlled by this underlying mind that we have. So when we want to make deep changes in an individual, especially specific habitual things that they do, at the same time, very strongly specific behavior that they demonstrate that they are not aware of most of the time. Excuse me. So when they are always operated by this underlying mind. So in coaching, what we do is the conscious process. We enable people to truly look at consciously who they are, look deep within themselves, and create patterns in a way that they can change subconscious behavior up to a certain extent. People often can take actions and change themselves, even if it is a subconscious behavior. At the same time, there are certain aspects that could contain certain amount of trauma. It could be trauma from their own life, childhood, or it can even be sometimes generational trauma, which might have been passed on to them through their genetics, which we call epigenetics. So when you experience trauma at that level, sometimes subconsciously you're very strongly hardwired because it's a fear function. It threats your survival. So then the way you operate is modified compared to what we usually call normal, right? So in order for us to correct that behavior, for an example, smoking, right? People say, I know it's bad smoking, but the moment they have the urge, they go light up another cigarette, right? That means they are not just controlled by conscious mind. It comes from their deeper conscious mind, right? Subconscious mind. So therapy is to work with these vibrational changes. It doesn't matter what kind of therapy we use. Whatever that works, we need to integrate and create that vibrational change so that we can do the subconscious change. So as a coach, we usually operate in this conscious world. Now, how do these two come together? This is where the intersection that we are talking about. Now, this is the beauty of these two worlds. Now, as a coach, we know that we create lots of self-awareness and we come into the space as an equal partner with our clients. At the same time, we create a space that we learn from the client rather than looking at we are the superior or we know more than the client, right? So with this mindset, what happens is when a client goes through this psychedelic experience, like you said very well, they get a different frame of perception. So they create awareness that is usually expanding their consciousness. Very interesting insights are created during these deep therapeutic experiences, right? As you very, very well mentioned. So you have a different perspective. Now you bring that perspective back. And now how do we see what that means and then create development out of that? So on a conscious level, when someone has experienced something vibrational, like a psychedelic experience, when they come out of it, all the insights and learning, every little bits of whatever that they experience during the experience is extremely valuable for their development. So a coach is someone who can elevate that process and find those answers that client already has found within themselves and bring them to the next level so that it creates true impact in the client. That's how the coaching lens of it. Now the therapy lens of it is that, as you know, if you observe the psilocybin brain under MRI during they are going through the experience, the peaks of the experience, we find out the default mode network of our brain is almost in a non-functional state. So I'm sharing, probably, Yannick, you shared this many times in your podcast. I'm sharing this coming from a perspective of what happens to our brain. I hope you don't mind me going into details.
No, please do.
Yeah. Okay. So we have the default mode network, certain areas of our brain, and they become almost non-functional in a very safe way. And at the same time, all the cortexes, they like what are responsible for sound, balance, language, all of those start connecting directly with each other. And they create this possibility of experiencing a mystical experience, or we call it ego death, which means the sense of self is about ourselves, which means who we are, our identifications, our associations to the world. At the same time, awareness of our time, past, present, future, all of those things is stored in the default mode network. So in the default mode network is almost not present to our brain. They connect in a beautiful way that it magnifies the brain connections to several more times than the usual state, which means the client is vibrationally open. This is a state very suggestive. This is a space where the client, if the client reflected in the right way, in a very safe, vulnerable, comfortable space, a very safe space with the right guidance, they can alter their subconscious mind Well, this is in my personal belief. At a quantum level, at a molecular level, we create changes to ourselves, and that's why we heal through this experience when we come out of it. So all that so a therapist can handle this part because they understand what happens in our brain from a neuroscience perspective, psychological perspective, and also the intervention itself. What kind of intervention are we using in this kind of situation? So having a deeper knowledge about therapeutic understanding, science, and clinical understanding of this medicine is extremely important if we invite clients into ceremonies where they apply psilocybin ingestion, right? So if we go to that level, then we need to have a very good, deep understanding about the medicine. And however, that shouldn't hinder a coach being able to work with individuals who may be taking their own responsibility to go through these experiences, or maybe they partner up with another therapist who offers psilocybin. And I can speak for a therapist and say, usually when we work with a patient, very often we look at the patient as something to be fixed. There's something to be fixed. We come into that space. But we know as the professional coaches, that's the power and the beauty and the very backbone of coaching, where we come in partner with clients and wanting to learn from the client and let the client be the lead, at the same time the expert of their own life. So when client has created so much self-awareness, self-efficacy, and I would also like to call this superpositioning. Usually we know often people are on their own way most of the time. They have their own problem. When they have their default mode network shuts down for a while, when they look at themselves as who they are, all of a sudden their perception has changed about themselves. So they are in the best understanding of who they are because they have had the opportunity to see themselves from a different perspective, which is not normal. And that's why we call it mystical, that which cannot be explained using measures. Right. So that's how these two worlds come together. So I think coaches are really very well best positioned to work with individuals who go through these psychedelic journeys.
Yeah. So what I take from this, and do correct me if I misunderstood, is that one of the big differences is that therapists have so much more training and so much more journey behind them, that during an experience where the client is highly suggestible, they have what it takes to guide someone towards a desirable outcome. It's a very risky place when somebody's in that state, right? You can possibly cause a lot of damage, but you can also influence a lot of healing. And that coaching, I mean, I haven't said it explicitly. It sounded like coaching makes a lot more sense, helping somebody prepare for this, setting intentions, integrating the experience, seeing what can I do differently in my life now that I'm back. Is that a fair interpretation of what you said?
I think that's a brilliant way of explaining it, Yannick. Absolutely. If you don't mind, let me also tap into something that you earlier mentioned, which is that the information that we receive during the experience, right? True that there are certain mystical elements to it. At the same time, when the mind reveals itself, we realize that it's the information actually we accumulated that come into play in a way. Now, which means that building awareness in an individual towards what they want to receive as an outcome is something extremely valuable. So the preparation protocol, the process, right? During that process, a coach can really very integrally involve with the client and enable them to truly create that intention. Why are they going to go through this deep vibrational experience? And then, as you said, integrating it again, because now they had certain awareness. I think two things happen during a psychedelic journey. One is that the awareness itself expands. This is what we call expansion of consciousness. And then secondly, certain true healing needs or developmental needs also actualize during that period of time. Actualization. So working with the coach, anyone who is planning to go through a psychedelic journey, I think working with the coach and really looking at themselves at a deeper level from higher perspective would be extremely valuable in terms of creating development and then integrating it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just the outside perspective. Having someone who's not in your mind and who's inviting you to clarify things, often to yourself, just exploring things deeper. They're like, "Ooh, what's that?" We often brush over really significant things, and just having someone on the outside who said, "Oh, what was that? Can you tell me a bit more about that?" It's just so valuable. Fernando, you're a storyteller, right? So I wonder if you could take us through a client case. Maybe pick a story or a client that kind of signifies a lot of. I don't think there's a typical coaching client, but if you had to think about a client that kind of illustrates quite well what a coaching journey might look like, I wonder if you could take us through that from how somebody reaches out, what a consultation might look like, what the preparation work like. You're taking people on experiences as well, and then the integration process. So take as much time as you want with that. The more detail, the better, probably. But it'd be great if you could take us through such a journey if someone were to work with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Yannick. What a thoughtful question. I think... So this comes with a little bit of how I created this protocol to begin with. Mm-hmm. So once I experienced the power of it, I decided to continue to experience it in therapeutic setting. So the more I went deeper into it, the more I understood how the medicine works really. When it works for you directly, you realize a lot of things, like especially energy alignments, how certain different elements of us can be corrected and put it into specific alignment, right? So with this, I come to very quickly understand that in terms of building the client towards their ceremony or the application, it's something that if we can tap into certain realities of our universe, for an example, evolution, death, our own body, right? And looking at the molecular structure and construct of our body. If someone is willing to create a true breakthrough, which is an actualization of who they are to begin from, because he said like a journey. So when I look at it, I feel what signifies a journey? Sorry, I'm taking a step back. Mm-hmm. Give me a second. Let me take a step back, right? Let me come from a place of a journey perspective. Let me put the client first, like what we do. Okay, let's say we have a lot of seekers reaching out to me, working with seekers, right? Asking questions, like I used to ask a lot of questions. So for them, finding a breakthrough to fully coming to terms with who they are, not understanding about everything, coming to terms with who they are, and beginning a journey to get there, right? So this is the journey that we're talking about. So someone reach out to us, and then we have an initial screening. Now I'm talking about incorporating coaching and psychedelic intervention both together, specifically psilocybin, the magic mushroom, the hallucinogenic mushroom. So when someone reaches out, we have a very specific way of screening the person to see if they are medically fit for this experience. There are certain categorized conditions as mental illness that we need to be aware of if the person is through this experience. After that, we do initial consultation.
Sorry, can we zoom in on that a little bit? Because screening is definitely something a lot of coaches are really interested in. Do you use any standardized measures, or where did you pick that up? How did you develop that protocol for screening?
Yes, very good question. Now, this is very important. Yes, so there's a series of mental disorders we call. I do not really agree in labeling things as disorders. At the same time, so we need to screen them and assure if they have a history of any of these diagnoses, or if there's a tendency that they might not even be aware of, because often when you do the screening, sometimes people say, like the first screening, like, are you aware of or history of? Often people tick and say nothing. And then when you go into details, you find out, okay, there are certain things that you're not aware of. So we have a specific several online tests we put the client through. And then, well, I must say that it doesn't disqualify anyone going through the experience. It's about creating the precautions, because when we take people under this experience, you also have medical professionals with us for psychological aids or anything that might be needed at the moment, and also someone who can prescribe medicine. In case, so we have that kind of preparation process. So it's important that we fully prepared in case if something comes up, how to deal with it. So screening is very important, and I think not just only the practitioners. There may be individuals who listening to this podcast, because you might be interested in going on a journey by yourself. If you're doing so, do some psychological screening, and I recommend highly to see your psychologist or psychotherapist or psychiatrist and do some tests before you take this, so that you're prepared. You're very well prepared. Great question, Anik. Thank you. Right. So we do the screening and we invite them into a conversation. And during this, we tap into certain areas of who they are, understanding who they are, what their goal is, and also understanding their current circumstances. This is something very important. Like, the popular saying, you can't educate someone if the person is hungry. So we truly try to understand the circumstances around the person, because frankly speaking, when someone takes a journey like this at a deeper level, I think this is important. This is demystifying this process. So important to say that if you are at a time, if you are in, everyone and anyone deserves to go through this experience. Your circumstances don't matter really. But at the same time, I would like to share, you need to be very well prepared. The reason is that if you might be in a place where you are, in terms of your resources, in terms of the relationships around you, if you go through an experience and if you come to understand certain realities that you never saw before that exist in our systemic world, that could really bring someone down to their knees. So if there is no proper integration, that can do more harm than actually helping you. It would help you understand. You might say, I'm awakened now. Great. But many people complain then feeling a downtime in their life. So this is very important. So what we do is we make sure that our patients or clients have the resources. Resources mainly mean here time, that they have time to themselves, that they can reflect and maximize this experience. So once we understand that, then we understand very clearly their needs, and then we do a proper standard screenings. And then also if there's a need, we consult a psychiatrist. And then we the person into a process of two things. One is exploration of the inner universe. And
sorry, before we go there, can I just ask, how much time do you recommend your clients take off after an experience? And is there any guidance from your end in terms of how they could prepare for this?
I think this is a very subjective answer, probably. One would be able to do it today and go to work tomorrow, frankly speaking. At the same time, if someone wants to be very precautious, I would say this is a huge opportunity that one gets in their life. Probably the very first time their brain makes literal the most amount of connections that it has ever made. So that means it brings so much awareness to you about your own self, and also outside of yourself, the world itself. So this is what Yannick is trying to bring to this world, encouraging coaches to help them to integrate this awareness into this. So I would say, when I did it myself, let me say like that, I cleared up 7 days and I got my myself to a place that I will not be disturbed by. I had let me say like this, full control over my space. And I had a place that it's not usual to me. So there were no clutter or anything like that. I was staying in a very comfortable, safe space for a week. Lots of self-work, and I work with my supervisor. I work with my mentor. I spend a lot of time with my loved ones. And I must say that was the most healing time of my life I have experienced. I felt like I retreated from my entire life. That's also why I meant to mention earlier that since I was very young, I supported my family and I worked for a family since I was very young. And I felt when I did this experience, it helped me to retreat.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned time on your own, being in control of your space, and you also mentioned loved ones. And depending on the loved ones, it can be in some tension, right? So, for example, after my first ayahuasca ceremony, I remember the shaman and the organizer of the event. They really encouraged us to take some time for ourselves and resist the urge to tell everybody about what you've experienced and what's going on for you now, partly because they just don't have that capacity often to understand the magnitude of the experience if they haven't lived through something like that. And even if they have some understanding around psychedelic experiences, it can be really beneficial to first spend time on your own to kind of process this without something that you cannot control, which is other people. So I wonder, when you work with clients, what's the work in preparing a useful space for integration afterwards?
Right. Okay. So the internal, I think it's just a perfect place to ask this question. So I invite so by understanding what the client wants to do, so I have individuals who are working with me because they're experiencing neuropathic pain, which means a phantom pain that pops up in our body somewhere, right? It's actually a pain that exists in the mind, not in the body. It says so. I mean, that's what we can assume. And then someone like this would be fully focused on the solution, which means as soon as possible they want to feel healed. So their work is very focused on their own trauma, like how did that start and what happened, and then you understand that and then you work through that. So that's a therapeutic work, which is kind of off limits to a coach. Not kind of, I must say, off limits to a coach, right? And then if we look at the other side of it, then we can help the client, someone who is looking for spiritual development, for an example, or creating energy in their life, something like that. And then we can invite the person to explore themselves holistically, who they are truly. Like Yannick mentioned earlier, often that we grow up to become someone without knowing how we got there. And then when we look back, we realize that happened to me at this age. I met this person at this age. That left a scar. This happened to me. So when we look back, we realize that we are an outcome of a lot of incidents that happened to us, formed by those. And there's to a great level, without even us realizing, them controlling us. So looking at that and seeing the bigger picture helps someone to create a deep understanding about themselves. Then on the other side, inviting them also to recognize, where do they live? Like, what are we doing where what we call Earth, and, living in this world? Like, we feel like our world is kind of like, if we live in a city, our world is kind of limited between home and our office and the few leisure places we go. And then there's a much bigger picture. It might be traveling, but no, there's much bigger picture. We live in a big, huge ball of iron, and in the middle of it, there's lava. And so understanding that bigger reality and looking at ourselves from the universe and seeing how insignificant we are, although we feel so significant in our own mind. So inviting them to recognize that truth and look at it, help them to realize that most of the time, that all these problems that they see in the world between their home and their workplace and the places that they hang out, there's so much more to this universe. So when they understand that, and when they arrive at the experience, they really have expanded their consciousness to a great extent already on their own lead. They have found out what is important to them, and they have developed, and at the same time, an invitation for them to look outside the world. So when they reach at the ceremony, or in other words, ingestion of psilocybin, they have a very good understanding of what is happening to them and where they are living. And then they go through the experience. So these can be a couple of sessions in many different, sometimes we use some therapeutic modalities, sometimes we use certain personality assessment tests. We use coaching, very direct coaching, client leading all through. So all of those things prepare the person for their experience. And usually we choose a place which is very comfort, homely, cozy. And that's when bring the client into the experience.
Could you give us some examples of some of these modalities or some of these techniques or assessments that help people prepare?
Yeah, sure. So for an example, to look at a person's life, as a general example, I would say DISC, for an example, right? The DISC assessment system. So
DISC is based on Jungian archetypes, no? Personality assessment.
Yes, personal assessment. So inviting a person to look at them. So these are very general things coaches very often use, right? So inviting the person to look at some of these things, right? Some of their own personality traits, understanding who they are at a deeper level. So this is one type of things. And then if I'm to talk about some therapy modalities, one of them can be clinical regression. We are bringing the client at a theta state and then reassuring or restating what is required to happen in the mind. Now, when we do that, we need to do that in a very safe space, and we also need to do it in a very accurate manner that the brain understands. Because what happens, how mind understand and the brain understand are two different things, right? The brain understands between the pain and the pleasure. And then the mind understands good and bad, negative, positive, right, wrong, all of that. But our brain doesn't understand it in that way. So even a little verbal suggestion that we are creating at a deeper level can affect the client. So we need to be very careful. So this is clinical regression. And then sometimes we look at things like internal family systems. So for an example, an easier example, let's think about legacy burdens, which means often we perceive ourselves based on the legacies that we have created for ourselves, which is extreme high conditioning that is psychologically affecting the person in a way that they cannot see beyond that frame of mind they're in. So for an example, one of them can be like, I live in this part of the world. Often there's a lot of migration happening in Southeast Asia, and we see some people have this mindset: the harder you work, the more money you can earn. This kind of mindset. You have to work very hard. Every time you have a salary increment, you have to work harder. Otherwise, you can't justify why you're earning money. So this comes from this legacy burden of having seen migrant parents working very hard. What is most important to those parents was to actually bring up their children. So they really work so hard, right? So even the younger generations who may have a better living conditions, but they still seem to not be able to see themselves in this interesting mindset, for an example, right? So this is called legacy burden. Legacy burdens also can occur through the generational trauma. Where something we learn through the evolution learns through trauma. Fear and pain are so important to us. Sometimes we don't recognize it. So just to go really deep into answer your question, if you don't mind, this is very closer to my heart, this subject, because it's affecting all of us, and we are not recognizing how powerful understanding ourselves is, demystifying ourselves, understanding the processes, right? So I invite you to think about, in a way, when we were first born, we brought our hands together. We touched our hands like this. And then we felt, oh, I can touch me. And then I realized, I don't remember this, but that what must have happened. I looked at my shoulders. I realized hands are connected to me. And then I get my first paper cut. I get first electrocuted. I get first burned. So I learn. So this is the survival mechanism itself, right? There is pain, so we experience fear so that we continue to survive. But as we used to live in the jungle through the evolutionary process, in the forests, we had to protect ourselves very strongly. So the fear was not only needed for just the survival, but also to be able to not be eaten by other big predators, right? So we grew like that. So our brain is hardwired to experience pain. So as human beings, we are becoming more and more logical. We have all these possibilities like coaching, therapy, all of that, to recognize that we don't have to throw fear and pain at each other. If we understood ourselves at a deeper level, pain was necessary in the forest and jungle. Now we can live a much more emotionally blissful life. I'm not saying happy life, that's not possible, but emotional life in this space, right? So that's where now, when we go that level, we realize that the fear was part of us because it was generationally passed on to us. Fear occurred through trauma, which means we were trying to be eaten when we were in the jungle. And then now being assaulted, lots of different things from certain natural disasters and so on. So what happens is we start to clearly see that having the deep conscious mind, how it creates certain alignments in our mind that controls our behavior. So this is why it's important for us to understand at a deeper level how certain different types of psychological alignments can be created, right? So that's one of them we use, right? So the family system, seeing epigenetics, how it works, and recognizing, being able to tap into where is that coming from, and then being able to address it in this existence or current time, so that they can resolve it psychologically and at a vibration level, or actualize the problem, right? So that is something else. And we use the ICF coaching framework very strongly as the driver of the entire process. And we also do another methodology, which is Vipassana. If you may have heard about Vipassana, it's
silent retreats, no?
Yes, exactly. It's a Buddhist meditation practice. Simple terms, Vipassana truly means observation and seeing. So invitation. So earlier when I mentioned exploration of the external universe, what we truly mean by this is using the Buddhist meditation practice to truly look at ourselves at a deeper level, observe ourselves with compassion and unconditional love. So helping individuals to not just only, like to me personally, I would say the entire existence is spiritual. There's no such thing as to be separated as spiritual. But anyway, in the mainstream understanding, we have the spiritual component to life. Often people think that spiritual is something that we need to deal with when we are this, when we are that. But we don't realize that that is old time spiritual. We don't realize that we can incorporate spirituality right into our lives, right here, right in the midst of the chaos of the BC hallways or the MRT. It doesn't matter. We can embody spirituality right in our life and embody our life itself as spiritual. So inviting individuals to look at themselves at a deeper level, observe themselves at a deeper level, and creating it as a vibrational practice, which also train their mind for the journey itself. Often people are very scared of the journey. They think something very something that might that could be a challenging experience. Yes, it could be a challenging experience. So what we do is in order for people to go through a safe experience, we use Vipassana as a reflection, introspection, so which means creating awareness and expansion of consciousness, and also as a way of preparing them to have the right vibrations, because they are now habitually prepared, trained to be in that state of mind as they go through the experience. So Vipassana is another modality we use.
Sorry, quick question. Vipassana, I understand, is always 10 days. Is that true? Or is there shorter forms of, sitting in silence to prepare for this?
Right. So it's Vipassana retreats. If someone is organizing a Vipassana retreat, potentially they would invite you to come there for at least 10 days. At the same time, Vipassana is, in simple terms, Vipassana is, the Sanskrit word Vipassana translates into seeing or observation. So Vipassana as a meditation modality is seeing yourself, not just the 10 days, but seeing yourself all the time. Even right now, if we can see ourselves, in other words, presence, it's present. So that
right.
really,
So it's not linked to a particular length of framework that just became part of the Vipassana retreats. And Vipassana generally is a sense of observation and being with yourself and being really present with what is.
right. Exactly. So demystifying again, isn't it? So yeah. So yes, absolutely. So and Yannick, since there are coaches tuning into your podcast, I must say that as a professional coach, one of the most beautiful things that happened to me in my life is that when you go through thousands of hours of coaching, you become a true observer to the client, in a way that you just want to see the client as who they are, with no expectation of changing the client whatsoever. And in order for you to do that, you should be able to see yourself at the same time. So now I'm literally talking about coaching presence. So you are present to the client, and then you are present to yourself, because you also need to manage yourself. But that's not enough. You need to become present to the coaching process as well. Now, these are just 3 basic layers of presence in this conversation, if you technically look at it from coaching perspective. So when you learn to observe yourself from so many different perspectives, because your job demands you, your work demands you back-to-back coaching 8 times, if you do it the right way, you're on the way to creating very deep awareness, because you keep creating extremely high vibrational changes in your brain, and that stays with you in the long run. And that's what I'm talking about as actualization of awareness. Yeah. So as a professional coach, we are so privileged, really, to be in such high vibrations all the time. Yeah, this is a beautiful question. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, because presence is often seen as this, I'm being really present with the client and super tuned in with what's going on for them. And I think a lot of coaches tend to maybe forget or not quite be aware that you as a coach, you're very much part of this experience. And I think when we talk about it in a psychedelic context, I'm flying an extra flag for supervision, because a supervisor is a trained professional to help you expand your awareness as a coach. What's going on for you as a coach, an awareness of the coaching process, but also going beyond that, an awareness of the system within which the coaching takes place. Right? There's different cultural systems, there's different societal systems, there's different settings within the psychedelic spaces in which the experience takes place. There's shamanic modalities, there's Western science modalities. There's so many ways in which this work can be approached. And I think when we throw psychedelics, I mean, this is important in any coaching conversation, I think. Certainly beyond a certain level of maturity. But when we throw psychedelics in the mix, it's just absolutely crucially important, because the brain becomes malleable and suggestive, not just during the experience, but also in, I think it was the following 20, 30 days. I forgot the latest research, but like there's a period of several weeks where the brain is still open to suggestible. Somebody mentioned that metaphor of a plot of clay that gets warmed up and it gets softer and you can form it and shape it. And so I know there's a lot of coaches out there who get very excited by the opportunity to actively shape the client's mind. I would want my clients to use that plasticity, that neuroplasticity, that being able to shape some new grooves into how you do things. That's why psychedelics are so powerful. But also there's a huge responsibility with the practitioners sitting there. And their responsibility is not just to pay extra attention to what's going on for the client, but also how am I being triggered? You know, what would I want for this client? How might I unconsciously or consciously try to shape them and try to make them better? Right? As you said in the beginning when you were training, you wanted to develop people actively. You know, I'm doing the work to develop you. And I think many coaching clients, they come to us and they come to psychedelics so that we or psychedelics do the work for them. And I don't think that's how it works. And at the same time, I know there's a lot of coaches who are very happily and with great intentions put a lot of their own work in to shape clients in what they, the practitioner, the coach, thinks is important. And I know you're not on that, but at the same time, also you're offering some processes. So I guess what I'm curious next is, during the experience and following the experience, as a coach, to what extent are you an active part of this process?
Okay. I think it's an interesting lens, actually, the question that you brought up there. So how I understand your question is that, looking at my world of operation from the coach's perspective. Mm-hmm. However, I would like to, I will answer this question. At the same time, I would like to share with you that when we work as therapists, we often share this idea of integrative therapy, which means we see the value in everything that we know, and we integrate them in a way that would create the best intervention for the client. So obviously, then I'm operating from that kind of perspective, which means I bring coaching as one of my tools to the entire intervention that I create. So the intervention is not limited by coaching, rather being enhanced by coaching as a tool.
Yeah. Right. So your coaching would then also be often not pure coaching, but you would draw integratively on some of the therapy modalities as and when they are necessary or appropriate.
I think answer is yes, but this way, my clients would know every time when they are in their control space, which means coaching, that they are the ones who are going to lead the conversation. Okay. So of course, I wear a lot of hats, but there are days I tell them, right, today I'm going to be working, co-creating with you, and I'm going to create solutions with you today. Right. So I'm going to create with you today. And then the days that I conduct coaching, I say, today is going to be a coaching session. So it means that you are in full control. I'm here to learn. So that's how we usually begin our conversations. So
how do you make those decisions? And sorry to interrupt, but how do you make a decision whether today is going to be a coaching day or today is going to be a therapy day?
I really don't. So we have a framework that we have created in advance, right? So then we would say that there is, so first of all, the client says what needs to happen. And then as a therapist, I can say, right, you may be needing these areas of work subconsciously, which means the intervention needs to be provided. And then I see lots of potential and opportunity for you to develop on this side. And then depending on the kind of developmental journey that they are looking at, so we assign a set of, we create a contract. Okay, so let's work this many hours over this period of time, right? So we begin this. And then we usually, when a client comes, we usually have psychological safe days for therapy, which means I will not see a therapy client early in the morning at 7 o'clock if the client has to work at 9 o'clock, right? That's not appropriate. So we find the right days the client is in a psychological space for therapy work, right? So it can be a weekend, it can be an evening, and I know that the client is going to be in a psychological safe space to reflect and to receive the healing, the development. Yeah. And then even then, when the client comes to one of those assigned sessions, we would ask, so what would you like to do today? It's completely on client's agenda. So what would you like to do? Usually we use this for time. What is on top of your mind, right? So the client is in control to decide, because it's so simple. The entire psychedelic journey tells us client has all the answers, and those are the answers we find out in special psychedelic vibrational space. So what we have learned from the nature, we incorporate here, and making sure that the client knows what they want on that day. And then for the coaching days, of course, we have a very large arena of things that we are working on. It's like a playground. They decide which area they would like to play that day. So that's how the process evolves. It's very very thoughtful program, intelligent program as well.
Yeah, and contextual, it seems. It seems that you really plan this together with a client, and each client seems to be a bit different. Are there constants, things that always happen with every client in preparation or during the experience or after?
Yes, the development, of course. That's a common thing. Yes, awareness and the development. No, I would say no. Every client has a very different way of approaching it. At the same time, there are few things that is universally most people who go through this experience come back and report. Those things also our clients and patients report as usual. Other than that, in terms of their personal developmental journey, I have never seen two people the same. The reaction, how they integrate, the meanings they create. It's fascinating. It fascinates me. No two clients are ever the same. Yeah, I think that's short answer. Yeah. How about you, Yannick? How about you? Do you find connections among people that you work with who go through psychedelic journeys?
Yeah, I mean, I think what everybody is taking from the psychedelic journey is very, very diverse. There are some things around process that over time just happen, right? So screening would always be a conversation. That doesn't often, like, it doesn't always happen in the same way, right? I don't use a standardized tool for every person, and they have to fill it in before they come to a consultation or their specific time. But it's always part of a conversation. So there's a certain checklist that I go through in terms of, well, how do you make sure you keep yourself safe during the experience? How do you create space for yourself before going into it and after coming out of it? How are you going to vet the space where you have the experience, or the facilitator, the guide? Ethical concerns, expectations, hopes, setting intentions. So these are all part of the process of preparing for this. What kind of substance is it going to be, and how did you make those decisions, and what might you read, or who might you talk to ahead of that? Who do you know who knows a lot of things about this? And so I'm very facilitative when it comes to that kind of process, because that's the kind of coach I am. I know there's a lot of coaches who are very willing and also very able to take their client by the hand and say, here's the 2-3 books that you need to read before you do this, before the first session. Here's the homework that I want you to do preparing for this. Here's 15 questions that are going to help you reflect on, and I want you to journal on each of those for 20 minutes, before you go into your experience. I know there's some fantastic guides from retreats. For example, I saw a client of mine received a workbook from their retreat center, and it was really helpful questions that, cover some of the bases that you already mentioned. Who am I as a person? What makes me me? What I want to get out of this experience? How can I formulate an intention that I can really focus on and meditate on, and then let go during the experience? There's certain guidance on how to approach the experience. And I, as a coach, I don't really want to do that. I have received great benefit by somebody telling me before my first ceremony, for example, with ayahuasca. It's just, yes, focus in on your attention, but then just let it go. Just surrender to the experience. Fantastic advice. Michael Pollan's advice on, when you meet a big, scary monster, just get curious. Hey, big, scary monster, what are you doing in my mind? That is so interesting that you are here. What can I learn from you? That's super helpful advice. And as a coach, I want to be careful not to be the person that they go for advice and guidance, because I don't want to put myself into that role, because otherwise I'll carry a lot of responsibility. And while sometimes it's difficult not to put that on the table, they say, what's some advice I should know going into a session like this? If I resist, if I give in to the temptation, I have a lot of helpful advice, arguably. But then they want more of that advice. And it's really difficult to get back from that position. When I say, who could you talk to? What could you read? Who do you know who knows about these things? Then I'll activate my client's curiosity and resource to learn, rather than just telling them and teaching them. So, and I know within the psychedelic field especially, since not that many coaches, or, since it seems the majority of coaches who work with psychedelics or around psychedelics, they're not from coaching, or they're from a kind of coaching that has a teaching element, mentoring element, that are happy to guide. So I wonder how you position yourself or relate to that. I mean, the ICF framework is very much a facilitative framework, but also over the years, especially since you also run the retreats, there's so much knowledge and guidance that you have to offer. So I wonder how you relate to that. Do you offer guidance? Do you share knowledge? Do you give advice? Or do you stay in that facilitative role? And how do you make these decisions if they're contextual?
A great question. Now, so something that I love about the ICF framework. So before a therapist, I was a coach. I come from the coaching background. I must, that's where I started. And then when I started to realize that there are deeper things that clients would want to work probably that would be helpful for them. That I realized that, okay, there's a boundary now. So I started pushing my boundary. That's how I got into the therapy world. So I come as a coach. Because of this reason, Yannick, I see. So probably most clients I work with find so much. One of the things that I often hear is that working with me is liberating. This is kind of the things that they like free. I feel free working with you. I think this is because especially the coaching background that I come from. Naturally, because I have strongly, because I have come from a coaching background and see the immense value, like I mentioned earlier, I tried to work for my clients earlier to develop them, right? And then I realized it's not working. So because I came from that space, I knew it's not any different, even if the client requires therapy. So this is how I step into the space, always from understanding what is most important to the client and moving on the client's journey. Now, when I say I do, so let's draw that line and say, let's remove all the therapy clients, right? Because there are interventions for that. Now, if I step back into this side of the world and look at the coaching, how we do it. So this is how it works. When we, let's say for a retreat, for an example, our individuals who will be joining the retreat start co-creating in advance. At least 4 or 6 weeks, they start co-creating online meetings before we meet in our locations. So during this, what happens is, I don't necessarily teach anything about evolution. What we do is we watch an interesting documentary series, and then during this live session, we have a bonfire. We have a set of people sitting around and discussing about what does that mean to you? What connections do you see for yourself? So if you notice, it's co-creation. It's almost a little bit like group coaching. I don't necessarily say that I want to get this message across, but I'm also a learner in the journey. I'm also curious to understand, what does that really mean to you? How does that expand our consciousness voluntarily on your own regard? And these sessions are kind of complementary, actually. We have a program, they join it if they want to. But if they didn't show up, no one is going to follow up with them. So it's fully on their own accord. They decide what they want to explore and they understand what it is. And then apart from that, when we talk about setting intentions and leading the client towards it, we have a very strict, straightforward coaching process. Fully coaching, completely about coaching. And then education parts would be something like teaching them about the medicine itself. What does it do in your mind? What chemical is it? And in case if we needed some assistance, what we would do, what medicine we would give, what kind of procedure we will use, that kind of information, of course, we teach them. I mean, we have an online program, they go through it, and they have to confirm that they have. Likewise. But again, it's a very self-led journey experience. They are on, it's self-led, very much self-led.
So self-led with some elements of information that you put on the table as a starting point for people's exploration.
Right. Yeah. And I think we also need to make a little distinction between our clienteles as well. Now, if you're working with someone who comes from like IT or tech industry or from the finance industry or someone like that, that kind of clients, they are not interested in finding the secrets of the universe. They have a specific reason why they come for code. There could be a behavioral modification or certain assistance they're looking for. And they start at A and they finish at that goal they wanted and they go. this is not my regular clientele. That's the thing, right? Like I said at the beginning, I am not in a hurry for anything. I am not in a hurry to quickly someone to get by something. I am here to enjoy my being with individuals who can meet me at that level and explore the universe, because I am not living for others. I'm living for myself. So I will only co-create with individuals who can co-create at my level. So I do a lot of charity and help people. That's a different story. But at the same time, I work with individuals who would like to see bigger realities than them. And this is the thing, right? Like once you have everything in life, when I say everything, it doesn't necessarily say just the wealth. Everything to me is actually freedom, mind freedom, and the bliss. When you have that, you are not chasing anything in life. You are not in a rush for anything. When you get to that level, you become curious about yourself deeply. You become curious about the world deeply. And that's the kind of individuals I work with. So I'm in a different world, even if it is coaching. But of course, I know the other side of the coin because I come from there. This is how I came to this side. But I started as a coach who worked in organizations, life coaching, relationship coaching, done that, been there.
Yeah. That makes sense, and I appreciate that bigger picture. And we do often attract the clients who are more like us, right? Inevitably by how we show up. So someone who resonates with you chances are they're going to be interested in some bigger picture questions.
Exactly.
I'm also a bigger picture thinker, so let me make a conscious effort to go back into the detail because I know that's also where a lot of the value lies. So I'm curious, how long does it typically take after an experience for the first integration session to take place? And what might happen in the meantime between the end of the experience and the first integration session for the client to perhaps prepare for it?
So the integration session begins immediately after the experience.
What is immediately? Because it can be difficult to say at what point exactly is the experience over, because it's a transition, right?
Yeah, immediately the moment the client can sit down and start talking.
Oh, right. So there might still be very much on the influence.
Yes. Yeah. This helps them to solidify lots of things that they have experienced. There are two things happens here. One is that the things that they immediately remember, they are able to put out there and we have many resources available to them. There's no one forcing. We invite them after whenever you feel like. We'll sit here. We have a specific number of hours and we have cleared out the day usually when we do that. So we sit back and relax and wait until the client is ready to speak, or until the client is not ready to speak. So we wait until the client stand up and say what they want to do. I have never had a client who said, I don't want to use this creative energy. So they immediately go into an immersive world that we don't understand nothing about. But I saw this. I was like, I want to write it here. I saw this one. I want to put it here. I felt my grandmom's consciousness here. I want to put my goals here. I felt my power here. So they do all that kind of work.
Sorry, just for clarity, how can I imagine that setup? So it sounds like you said so there's some people, not just you on your own, and there seems to be different areas. So this is a group setting, or does this experience happen one-to-one? There seems to be an area where the experience happens, but also there seems to be open access to an area where they can start working on it. So how can I imagine that setup?
Yes, so you can think about it as a consultation room and then also having a lobby outside, something like that. And then I will always have someone in the lobby who can prescribe medicine to the client in case of an emergency. So they stay there, and also any other medical emergency occurs because I'm not a medical doctor. So they remain in the lobby space in case if anything is necessary. And then I also usually have, so if the client is a female client, so I am male, I also invite a female therapist to be present with me because we balance the energy as a feminine and male energy. And also there's let's be frank, when we go deep into our mind, we explore certain sexual spaces as well. So sometimes we come out with those, and then balancing this energy is very important because it's a suggestible environment, like I said. So having that space for the client to be sure that, I don't necessarily say that, okay, if you're female gender, you have to have a male gender, anything like that. But what I mean to say is, here, when you have male energy, female energy, it balances out to a certain extent. I don't think the science can explain that, but that's how I see it. And it's very helpful, extremely helpful. And I see why I'm doing that. And there's a reason for that. So we do it like that. That's usually the most of the time. There will be like 3 people, and if the person prefers to have someone like a partner or caregiver or someone, they also can wait in the lobby area.
Mm-hmm. So have someone close that you trust, just to create more comfort, more safety.
Yeah. At the time the client goes through the experience, they have lots of the preparation, they're ready, they trust us, all of that. Now, Yannick, also just to mention that earlier, there was this little thing that we touched base upon, right? Like when we look at the world from a perspective of that relatives, loved ones, right? We see them as sometimes people who may disrupt our peace or have problems and all of that. At the same time, there's also people who have relationships who truly aligned in their relationships. And many of the people that I work with are like that. Their relationships are beautiful. They have, like, including my own relationships. So when I said I was with loved ones, I received the most beautiful support, and they created the most beautiful space, and they knew already the kind of journey I was going through. So it's pretty much the same for the loved ones that my clients are talking about. They would have someone who can hold them for who they are. And most of the time, it's like if the husband took the experience, he sees the value. So he brings the wife because he's already in a place of healing. So that's how our clientele works as well. Most of the time it comes through non-people. So there's a lot of trust. But we create a space where the client feels they're comfortable. Sometimes the client would say, okay, I just want to do with the female, and that's it. I don't want anyone else outside. So it's all right. We will go down and wait in the downstairs lobby for you then. So that's what we do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha. Right. So then, as soon as the client kind of comes out into is that also in the lobby, or is there a separate room where they start the work? Or do they just kind of sit up and there's people present?
Yes. So it's a dark room. It's a very nice, not dark necessarily, nicely lit room. And then we usually also invite the client to wear a headgear like you. And so it's like cut the noise. And we also have
eye shades as well, or?
Yeah, blindfold as well, blindfolded. And then we also tell the client if the person would like complete privacy, we're happy to leave the room and stay outside by the door open, just in case if they need it. I usually do not hold my clients during the experience unless they reached out to me. So I don't sit too close to them either. I create some space, and then, but I would not hesitate if they needed it. I always tell them, you can bring your hand out, I'll come and hold you, because it's not like they're unconscious during the experience, except for a few moments that they feel really drowsy, but anyone can anytime slowly come up if they wanted to, right? So I create that space. And it's mostly driven by the client. So usually client would say, no, I just only want this person. I'll be with the person. So we respect it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So then integration might start immediately, but it could also start later. It depends a little bit on where the client is and what kind of frame of mind they're in.
Yes. So if the client said, I don't want to do it right now, we make sure the client is safe. We won't let them alone, because we also have had situations sometimes. So like earlier you asked why the in knowledge of therapy is important. Like sometimes clients might experience or recall an experience that might not necessarily directly theirs. So they might have a sense of something, like for an example, violent assault that happened to them. Might even be generational. It might pop up in certain energy. I'm not saying seeing it or remembering it, but it shows up in the experience. So now client comes out of the experience with trauma, experiencing trauma. There's a response to it. So knowing this might mean many things to the client, right? If the client is extremely shattered, they might want to hurt themselves. Very rare, extremely rare, right? Extremely, extremely rare. Never has happened to me as such, but it is a possibility. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's why we use science to make sure that we have got all the grounds. So because of this reason, we make sure the client is safe and monitoring the client or the patient. And apart from that, usually they come out of it and say they want to create. So usually they do things, sculpt something, start writing journals, start recording themselves, mostly we also encourage them to like a sensory experience a little bit. Like if you want me to go into nitty-gritty details. So we also help the client to create a psychological anchor to the experience. So anyone can use this as a tip even. So what we do is, because depending on the elevated energy they're in, if they recognize it as creative, valuable for them, empowered, if these are the keywords that come around when the clients speak, then we invite them to a small sensory experience if they feel like, because most of the time they're also a little bit hungry after the experience, brain energy a lot. So we tell them like a little bit of like lavender tea or smell of eucalyptus or a small piece of chocolate. We invite them to experience that and then feel the taste and connect it with the feeling and the emotion and also the electromagnetic changes that happen in our body. And then we invite them, whenever you feel a little bit anxious, you want to tap back into energy, go take the same lavender tea. You will be able to recall some of those memories and connections and build a little bit of feeling. So we do that a beautiful, soothing, like really safe space. Everyone pretty much, including us, in like very comfortable clothing. So everyone really participate, ask questions, and also gauge how much, sometimes when you're super positioned, you also don't like someone being in your ear as well. So understand. So our protocol is very specific. Just the coaching skills are not enough to work with a client who has just gone through the experience. You need a lot of training and experience to do that. Because very suggestive, So
I really want to underline that, right? Because whenever I talk to someone who's also sitting with and who's also, especially now, starting the work while the client is still under the influence, I think coaches need to be really careful with that. And you obviously come into this with a lot of training, a lot of experience, a lot of journey that you've done on yourself, but also gathering different modalities and taking all the steps to make sure that the client is safe within this experience, knowing when to refer, having people sitting outside who can administer medicine or have medical training. I think these things are so important to consider, especially when we're already starting the work while still the brain is very malleable, very plastic, right? This is I just wanted to underline that because it's important to highlight all the safety precautions that go into starting a journey when the experience is still ongoing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I need to be super careful. And it's also the most beautiful space for the client. If they're in the right space and feel safe, they create a lot. And usually, recently I talked to one of my clients and I asked him about, do you remember this happened during your experience? Because those things I can remember. And he said, did it really happen? I said, yeah, this is what you told me. He said, but I forgot that. But I remember I drove this, I drove that. So he was literally talking about whatever he did after rather than the experience itself. That fades away. But the development that happens within that very suggestible period of time, if we can do it right, then I think that creates immense development. So earlier I was talking about the vibrational change and some kind of like a actualization. This is where the actualization happens. So the client has, like, let's say, so for an example, here's a little tip that I recommend to our coaches. If you're working with clients who are going through this experience by themselves or with a therapist, ask them to come up with all their goals and actions that they have. Ask them to write it down, and immediately after the experience, when they feel ready, ask them to go through that. That creates a little imprint in their mind, positively suggested that they intended to do that. And also if they wrote it in a manner that they have achieved it, it's even better. Or if they can embody that during that time, like in our process, for an example, Yannick, we talk about embodiment of the full self. when we talk about embodiment of full self, we're not just only looking at self, but we also look at time as an embodiment. So we look at what you have been and who you are currently. Usually this is the two embodiments most people are having for themselves. Embodiment of who they were and what they are right now. But we invite them to embody also who they are in the future, to foreseeable future. And what is it that you are not just outcome of your yesterday, but if you were to be going to be an outcome of your future, how would you look like today? So this is one of the modalities that we use in terms of invitation for them to explore their universe. So when people do that, they create this efficacy within themselves as they look at themselves, envision their future. They are creating a picture of themselves in the future. And in 2022, we have just found out that the existence of time is not how we understood, right? I'm not going to talk about it, right?
You started seeing my eyes glow.
It's crazy. Things that we had in our protocols that we had no scientific backup is backed up now. I am just in the clouds, right? So using intuition and knowing what is important. So this is what I would also say. Now, when we work as a holistic practitioner in this space, actually knowing science, also knowing all the energetic alignments are great. At the same time, we as practitioners, we also need to really come to truly find ourselves. This is so important. And the more we find ourselves, the more the inner alignments and energy that we can find. Because for this kind of work, we need all that. It's not just one single-handed side. So for me, understanding this is really very important. And then bringing that to integration. Yeah.
Wow. I'm considering taking this in a somewhat different direction. I wonder if there's anything you might want to add to what's happening during integration. Maybe how long it lasts, how many sessions typically. Is there anything that you would add to the integration process that coaches might be able to learn from?
One of the tips I can give coming from my protocol, which is very unique, usually I create a mirror integration protocol to our preparation protocol. That means if you did 6 sessions initially to begin with the client, while you are keeping, so you collect learnings from the client's awareness. So I have some great developmental questions at the end. What did you, all the development, note it down, and then expectations and future projections, especially envisioning of future, the envisioning of success, bring that down and then do a mirror backwards the same number. So when the client comes to the space, client is in control to find out what they want to do on that day, and then always have 10 minutes to bring that up back in our very first session. So in our 6th session you did, so we do it first session here and then we go backwards. At the end, bringing that up and inviting client to see themselves there and see themselves here after the breakthrough, after the ceremony, creates some magic in the client. They start to perceive everything about themselves differently, especially with an increased efficacy. So I would say, in very short, considering that this is a short podcast, I would say, not necessarily short. Yeah.
Yeah, we're 2 hours in now.
Yeah.
But still relatively short. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, I will share that. So the integration process is, again, then you understand our integration process is then, of course, a mirror protocol. That means we just not only just do the coaching, but we also go back again, explore the external universe. How has it shifted? And this process is the most important thing. Because interestingly, sometimes there are so many things that shift inside of us without even us knowing, but through the conversation, they show up and then they stabilize in our mind. And it's a literal possibility that happens in our mind. In other words, the more you repeat something, the more it stays with you, just the simple technique. So if we bring the client back into the experience, and also I would say during the not just only during the integration process, but I highly encourage all the coaches to truly use a lot of somatics and emotions tap into clients almost every emotion. Like, how do you feel about that? I see you were using your hand like this. What does that mean? Now I see that you're on this side. What does that mean? Our body is so intelligent. It tells a lot of stories, right? And then find out those stories, find the secrets to their own behavior. Don't just only listen to what the client is saying, but listen to their things like they would say, maybe, I want to do maybe, right? So instead of saying about what they're trying to do, show them, hey, you said 5 times maybe. What does that mean? So catch like what is client is trying to tell you without trying to tell you directly. The mastery you go, it's the focus on what is client telling me but not telling, right? Listen to that. This is the most powerful thing in this kind of journey. And be brave as a coach. Create an amazing relationship with your client. First, create an amazing relationship with their client, and then challenge the client, right? Like as if you are their best friend. Challenge, use humor, use creativity, tap into emotions, break down the emotions, help them understand what are emotions, what are feelings, how are they connected, what is external stimuli. Help them understand. When we talk about our CEOs and people like that in high level positions, they're so busy. They know these things, but they have forgotten. Remind them, right? Extremely. So emotion, extremely helpful. Somatic awareness, extremely helpful. And let the client lead. Because I would say, as a rule, I would say, if a coach hasn't been through a psychedelic journey, you shouldn't coach. You should not coach. I would say that, because only then we have an exploration to understand, to understand at least bits and pieces of what that magnificent experience like, right? And helping the client to go back and feel that again and again is extremely valuable. So so you have this problem, but let's imagine when you were in the midst of your psychedelic experience, if you were there, what would you say about this? You know how powerful this question is? It breaks down all the coaching sessions. Oh yeah, okay. Actually, then client is automated afterwards. That's what happens. Like, you only have to ask that question. So if you were brought back to that energy, if you embody that, how is it now? Okay, they change their energy because they're recalling everything, and they come out as a different person and what they want to achieve, how they want to do it. And they know the process by then.
Yeah.
What's your mindset?
Yeah, I hear loud and clear that coaches should have their own experiences going into this. I do want to challenge that for a moment, because it's a debate we often have. Because I do think it's really valuable to understand the landscape a little bit, and yet everybody's experience is so different. And while there might be some parallels in terms of the experience, I'm not sure if, I think one experience would help everybody, but also one experience is a bit dangerous, because you might make a lot of assumptions of how it was for you versus how it was for others. You know, if you had 1,000 experiences, I think that obviously would be much more helpful. But also, how many coaches will gather 1,000 experiences? I have not gathered 1,000 experiences, far from it. So I always bring up the example of, well, do I need to have been a CEO in order to coach a CEO? And I would say no. I would say it probably creates a better relationship between you and the client if they know you also used to be a CEO, because there is this illusion of this person shares my experience, which really isn't true. And I don't think it's true for psychedelics either. So I wonder where that conviction comes from, that no, you absolutely have to have had your own experience if you want to do this kind of work.
Great. Yannick, actually very interesting. Now, the first thing is that this is my personal opinion, right? I'm not enforcing it on anyone. You know, there's no shoulds when it comes to outside world. How it's my perception, right? But there's something that interesting that you said in your sharing, right? You said that someone who doesn't know about, they don't need to have a knowledge of the experience. Now, this is coaching philosophy, right? Operating from a place of unknown. Right. So the more the coach who doesn't know about the client's world, the better it is.
In many ways, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So that is so valid. And that is so important. That is so important. So outside of my world, lots of opinions can exist, right? Including yours. It's not necessary. Well, do I have a problem with that? No, absolutely not, right? So it's great that that's how you think it. So if I am to share with how I look at it is, whether we like it or not, we are empathetic, compassionate creatures. Compassionate. And we are very much influenced by vibration. We would say a lot of things. Yeah. So I believe somehow when someone goes through this experience, there's a vibrational change to an individual. A vibrational change to an individual when they go through that experience. So you see, this is what I said at the very beginning. There are certain spaces, shamanic and metaphysical existence in this medicine, including the people who do the research like in John Hopkins' psychedelic research, accept the fact that there's a mystical component to it. So when one goes through that cycle, that kind of vibrational change, you don't resonate with the client at a conscious level. You resonate with the client at a vibrational level, Yannick. Now, if you ask me, where is the science to back up? I don't have it, right? So to be very honest with you, so that's what I mean by that. It's the true empathy. It's like, yes, you don't have to be a CEO to coach a CEO. That is very, very, very true. That's very, very, very good. And maybe having the, let me just say it like this. Let me say how, I mean, it's not like what should be right or wrong, but I would say it like this. You become what unknown is. That's the crazy thing that, yeah, okay, this is how I should answer this question. You know, I think I know unknown. That I'm not knowing client's world is unknown. And then this experience happens. I realize, oh my goodness, I didn't know that unknown can be so unknown. Right? It can be so unknown. Now that realization of unknown put me to like, damn, I don't know nothing. You said this earlier, right? There's a lot of other forces in the universe that we can't capture even with science. Science is a very small measurement. There's a lot out there going on out there, right? So this is what I mean by that. So as a professional coach, they might find, there's no limit to exploration, no? It's not like, let's see, when we say, I don't want to do this experience, you may have your reasons, but at the same time, you see, you're taking a side. I feel like that. There's nothing to take a side, should do or shouldn't do. Not like that. What enhances my quality? What enhances what I can deliver better? That's the real question here. I'm not choosing a side. It's not necessary, really. If I'm to really come from a place of love, I would say that it's what you, and I also have to agree that one maybe not knowing that vibrational change that may create amazing results for the client by not knowing. So who am I to say shouldn't? I mean, who am I to impose it on others, right? It's just me saying, I think I use the wrong language. Let me correct it myself right here, right? I can make mistakes. I can learn from it. So I think I say I highly recommend coaches. Thank you for that awareness. I highly recommend that one could use this substance or this natural medicine to experience what it is to be like unknown. And then you really know what unknown is for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I think this is really the value of having at least some experience, sampled some kind of different experiences, different substances, to get a bit of a sense for what the range of experience could be like, because I do think there's this vibrational resonance with someone who's been in the same space, even though they've had a different experience in the same space, they've been in the same space, right? There's a certain pressure that I think only CEOs can truly understand. And everybody's experience of being a CEO is going to be very different. But there is this resonance with the weight of the responsibility and the visibility, and the responsibility, that is, I think the reason why so many coaches who work with CEOs used to be in a CEO position. And that's why CEOs gravitate towards them. Some because of the illusion that this person will get me, even though that's not required, and chances are your experiences will be different. But just it opens a door. it opens a door into a relationship. And I think that's really helpful, because the simple answer to the question would, if you could choose between two coaches to help you and support you with your psychedelic experience, one had 0 experiences with psychedelics and the other one had quite a few, who would you go with? I think that's a very simple answer for probably everybody. I'd probably go with the person who've had experiences, as long as they can bracket that experience and appreciate that your experience might be different. So, but I like to challenge people on that, because I hear a lot of very kind of rigid, no, you absolutely must have had your experiences. And I don't think that's necessarily the case if you're coming from this facilitative coaching mindset that you clearly embody, that many coaches in the psychedelic space don't embody. They're much more guiding, much more directive, which is, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a different way of working. And coaching generally is seen as this facilitative practice rather than a directive practice. And yet, in a space where the knowledge about what coaching actually is maybe not so plentiful, which I find in the psychedelic space to be the case. Coaching seems to be more this American sports coaching grounded, well, let me coach you through this. I come in, I have knowledge, I take you by the hand, I guide you towards delight. I had guests on the podcast who very clearly say, we give some guidance and some information on how much that should take and what they should take into account when they go into an experience. And we recommend places, retreat centers, and we follow certain protocols. The clients feel safe in being taken by the hand and guided. But it's a very different experience. And I think it's a lot more empowering when somebody really tunes into you from what I would call that coaching mindset, a facilitative coaching mindset, really helping you to access the resources that are inside you rather than actively taking you by the hand. Because I hate it when clients tell me I couldn't have done it without you. My usual response is, well, it's nice that you say that, but I genuinely think that this was all in you. And I didn't actually do that much. I do give myself credit for the way that I hold space. And I think that's what makes facilitative coaching so beautiful, that the client believes that that's, but it's in them. They've done it. They've done the work. And I don't really want to be the person that has done the work for them. I want them to have to be able to say, I've done the work. Thank you so much for accompanying me on this journey. That's my ideal feedback. Thank you for creating the space or holding the space where I could do the work, but also giving themselves credit that they were seeking out being held like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yannick, I want to make a remark there with something that you're bringing up, which is crucial. I can see that you are very... I can see your focus on the self-directive development and people finding their leeway, right? This is amazing. And I think this is what attracted me to the coaching the most and why I stayed. And then until this very moment, how it creates so much value, enabling people to find their own answers. And in this, since that we touch base on coaching as a range of practice, that there are different ways of delivering coaching, there are certain elements of guiding sometimes. Now, in understanding the power of true letting the client lead, understanding that truly is the most extremely valuable quality if you want to work with a psychedelic client. Let's agree to that to begin with. Just sharing with you, since not many practitioners, not many coaches might be able to share this experience, because I guide people through this ceremony itself. One of my most common observations I have seen in terms of clients' energy and demeanor, or even the behavior, once the client goes through experience and when they have self-realized themselves in a very strong manner, when they come out, they are extremely powerful. They don't even recognize you there, to be very honest with you, when they hit that kind of center. I mean, not in a energy play, but they just, their entire world has cracked open all of a sudden. And then they see themselves for the very first time. They see the power within themselves for the very first time. And frankly speaking, at the end of any of these ceremonies, no one has ever said, "Thank you so much for supporting me today. Thank you for today." And they need to go because they have the power in them. So welcome to my world. I do not get told by people, "Oh, you did an amazing job." No, they say, "Thank you. Thank you for being with me today." That's what they say. So that there is that immense power within themselves. So coming back again, this is what I also said. There's a different protocol in terms of operating with a client in that state. It's very different from normal coaching also. So then in that case, during the coaching journey, enabling the client to really create their own journey is absolutely super important. I think not just only in psychedelics, just anywhere else, it's absolutely important. Yeah. I support you, Yannick. And I think if any coach listening to us and thinking, I want to bring my practice to the next level with psychedelics, learn to become unknown, being able to operate in a place of unknown. This is the most valuable, one of the valuable. And I also would say the next most important thing is learn also to become vulnerable yourself, to play a huge role in coaching presence. If you're operating mindfully and fully with the client, otherwise it can backfire on you. When we go into certain deep states working with people, what they say, we need to remember everything our client says affect us. Everything the client says affect us. And then we need to have self-care in order for us to remove trauma from ourselves. So it's a safe space. So integration is not just only for the client. Coach also needs to integrate everything. So now you need to work with the supervisor to do that. So if you are working with clients who are integrating, you also need to integrate that, because you also can be influenced by clients' thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Not because sometimes you're operating in unknown. When you operate in unknown, if a client specifically, let's say, talk about sexual trauma or certain specific thing, outside environmental conditions like temperature can activate a gene that was silent in us. If temperature can do that, a thought can reactivate a gene in our body which was hiding, maybe trauma related. So we need to be very careful when we're listening to our clients. So we need to integrate as well. We also need to do self-care. So all our practitioners, along with the service providers, we also do self-care integration by our supervision circle. So we also work with clients. So maybe I'm talking too much now, but I will say this much about integration.
This is great. This is all super valuable. I do have an eye on time, though. I know you said you blocked a little bit more this morning, but also I think there's only so much that people can take in. I think it's a good time we could talk about this for another couple of hours, I'm sure. But for the sake of bringing this chapter to a close, we have a couple of questions that I mentioned I'm asking all of our guests. So I'd love to take as much time as you want. This could be very quick answers. This could also take a bit longer. Take it where you want to. But first in this line is, what are some of the books or people that you would recommend, or that maybe that you would recommend, but that had a significant impact on the way that you work as a coach in combination with psychedelics, maybe as a guide?
Yeah, as a coach, if I'm to answer this question, I would say my mentor and supervisor, Benita Stafford Smith. I'm still under supervision currently as well. The reason, I think, the more you're asking what inspired me to, is it, just a direct answer?
Feel free to go any way you want. As that's on the table, I wonder, what is it about her that helped you, had the impact? And I know this could be a long story, right? This could also be, well, there's this one book she's written that I'd really recommend coaches to read, or there's this one article that really kind of opened something up for me. But feel free to tell us a story.
Sure. I think I would like, that thing. Okay, this is the story then. Very quickly. So when we became friends and I found out she's a coach, and I said, okay, I want to experience coaching. And then so we were dancing tango to begin with. And then we started hanging out, having lunches, dinners, and so on. And then one day we were driving, And this was in Oman, in an intersection, the car stopped. And it's a rare occurrence in Oman. A homeless looking person came and put their hand out. So I looked at it, and then the traffic was moving. So we moved forward. And as we were moving on, she asked me, Fernando, what do you think about that situation? So I immediately went on to saying things like, I feel sorry for the person, poor guy, why the government is not taking care of him. That kind of like, someone should help him. Like he's such a victimized situation, all that. I went into that jargon. She listened to me. We went into the place and we ordered food. We were having Thai food that day, and we were having lunch. And then she said, are you curious to know what I thought about the situation? Light bulb moment. I realized, I never bothered to ask her. Right. So that was one of the very first learnings. I felt a bit embarrassed. I was like, yeah, please tell me. And then she said something that changed my life. She said, I would invite him here for a cup of coffee. I'll sit with him and I'll ask his story. I had my mind blown. I first of all learned that I did not treat this person equally as I am a human being. I did not. I looked down upon the person. I thought I have to help the person, number one. And number two, I realized why make decisions for this person? Why I guess for this person that he needed government support? Maybe he's happier than me. Maybe he never thought about me, but I'm still talking about him. I realized I should never make a judgment about anyone, rather be curious. And that slapped me on my face. And that's just one incident that this is why I like experiential learning. So this kind of like, I've worked with her my entire career, and how she has enriched my career is commendable. And she has always done that by enabling me space, not by telling me what to do as a mentor. So I really love her. I cherish her. So I also invite those coaches who are working. I think like I would say, become the kind of coach that you have a great income, that you can hire the mentor in your dreams. This is when we really rise above, because we say other people will help you to grow and develop. So I invite you to grow and develop and work with a mentor who has a lot of love to share with you. To share. Yeah.
And I love that sort of thing. Happens all the time during psychedelic experiences. The mundane seeming situation, something you might not think about 2 minutes later, usually, it just can have a profound impact, when you pay attention to it and maybe reflect on it, because this moment could have just passed.
Right.
And she made it into a learning experience that we remember today.
Yannick, I'm seeing a learning opportunity for those who are listening here. Shall I use that as an example, if you don't mind?
Please.
So you just said something that is seemingly unimportant in life during psychedelics or after psychedelics. We might see it in a different depth and see it. Maybe we even see it as for the first time in our life. Now, this is what we're talking about as the default mode network, isn't it? Because when we look at things which we call seemingly normal, they are all seen to us through all the colors we are wearing, which means all our conditioning, all our trauma, all our knowledge, all these things we created for ourselves, little barriers. We look at that through that barrier. But during the chemical process, it shuts down. So you look at something, you go like, this is seemingly normal thing, but wow, this has so much profound meaning, right? So that's the power of shutting down our default mode network. In other words, sense of self for a while. So then we realize even the seemingly simple things have a profoundness to it, right? We get to see it. So thank you. I thought we'll point that out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Thank you, Fernando. What do you think about regulation? Is regulation something we need more of in the coaching and psychedelics field? Is it something that's going to be in the way of doing good work? The context of that question is a lot more coaches moving into this space and many doing amazing work. And I think quite a few are cowboys who probably put clients at risk. So, I try to ask that question about regulation. How do you feel about it?
This is a very counterintuitive question, Yannick. It's a very difficult question to answer, to be very honest with you, right? Because there are so many aspects that we can't control in this situation, right? So I would like to I have thought about this, but I really don't have an answer, really, because I try to be fair and honest and look at this. So if you ask me, in the coaching world, should we have a lot of regulations? I think if we look at regulations, like, I think we should look at it a little bit more like this. Let me say it like this. So we have regulations or accreditations or recognitions. More, let's not imagine it's because people do bad. Let's say it's because people want to show their credibility. So I think we should look at regulations as, okay, so there's a specific standard, there's a specific regulation. If I work towards that regulation or the standard, and if I demonstrated it, it would mean to me that I am responsible, socially responsible, and I'm also responsible for my clients when I'm working with, right? So I would say, looking at it as a benchmark for ourselves as a practitioner, yes, I absolutely recommend following the regulations and also following standards, professional standards, because I think when we are in a professional network, we also receive knowledge. We belong to a community of people who can support us. And also, regulations are especially there for the protection of the general public and ourselves as well, right? So having regulations is very, very important. Now, I should be also frank and speak about the other side of the story as well, a little bit, to be honest. So we also see that when we live in a systemic world, there are a lot of things controlled. So for an example, the usage of certain psychedelic compounds are restricted in certain parts of the world, right? So that means inhibiting the access to healing in people, right? So can I now make a decision there and say, can or not? I think I am in no way in a position to say yes or no to something like that. So I would say, if we can recognize the positive side of it and support it and create safety and psychological safety, literally safety of our clients, it's very important. And on the other hand side, I think certain natural elements in the universe is natural. Like I usually say that, if you look at the ocean, for an example, ocean is the greatest resource for this planet. At the same time, if we don't know how to interact with ocean safely, it's deadly. So everything is like that, right? Including psychedelic natural plants, for an example. So this is how I would like to come to this space, Yannick, but I don't have an opinion, to be very honest with you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll just say thank you. What's next? Well, we've already commented to quite some length on what would you say to someone who asks about the differences between coaching and therapy. So unless you have anything to add to that, I'd just say move on to the next question.
I would say one thing that I would like to actually, since this is a very great opportunity that I have to be in public space and talk to coaches. One of the things that I have noticed with our coaches is that I'm saying this because I belong to both worlds, in the therapy space as well as in the coaching space. There are certain, we love, of course, accompanying our clients through their developmental journeys. That's out of the question. So we invest ourselves a lot into helping the client to develop. At the same time, I invite you to remember that there are certain psychological associations that, as coaches, sometimes it seems very normal to us outside when we look at it. But there are some connections that need to really be addressed with a different type of a professional. So especially why I'm mentioning this now is that psychedelic intervention kickstart healing processes, which means it kickstarts trauma and lots of unseen shadows, lots of things show up. So if the coach is unprepared to handle all of that, then it's so important immediately take action to bring them to the right place and guide them, rather than guessing like, oh, can I help? Or this, like loving, compassionate, wanting to help the client. But I think we need to become professional and draw a line and say, this seems deeper than what it seems. So pass on. So which means coaches who are going into psychedelic intervention, I recommend you to educate yourself a little bit on therapy as well. Because if you don't know it's therapy, it belongs in therapy, you don't know. So you'll keep trying to help the client, but we might do more damage. So coaches, you're very welcome to this world. But there are resources in the world so much more than ever. So make it your oyster and learn more about it. The more you know, the better we can operate, because at the end of the most important thing is clients' development on their own accord and their safety utmost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important to have a referral network around you, that you know how far you can go, or at least there's a sense for a time when I'm no longer the best person to work with here. And reach out to a couple of people. If you don't know a therapist who does psychedelic integration, talk to some people. Google, find out who knows someone who might know someone who might know someone. Ask for an introduction. Have a 20-minute chat. Invite them to a digital coffee. Say you're a coach. Starting working with people who had psychedelic experiences. You understand and appreciate that there will be a scenario, not if, but when it happens that, I reached a limit of what I'm willing and able to do for people. And at that point, I'd love to refer them to somebody who's capable and credible. And I'd love to get to know you before I send anybody your way. I can't really see a therapist who would say no to that unless they're just extremely busy and have very long waiting lists. So similar with psychiatrists, right? You have people in your network and they're usually on site when there's experiences. So I think any coach in that sector would do well to talk to a few people and know where they could send people to.
Correct. In fact, Yannick, I can share with you my own experience. So I grew up thinking that, I just had a normal childhood and I never had anyone laying their hand on me growing up. But recently, one of my psychedelic experience, it's not psilocybin, it's another specific different one. During on that, something showed up and something showed in me, even in my body, energetic, like in a certain sensations, let me say. So showed up a certain assault that I only remember until the moment I arrived at that physical place. Only remembered until that point. I never questioned what happened to me afterwards. I thought as a child I forgot about it. But during the experience, while I was under the psychedelic, it showed up and it showed me the entire thing that happened to me. And then I understood certain responses I have in my general life towards certain people, certain situations. And I found out, okay, this is it. But it's not enough. When something like a physical assault, like intense trauma like this shows up, it requires more than the coaching world, right? So I immediately had to work with my therapist, unpacking all of that. So if a client said something like this showed up, I saw something like that. It's not coaching, so I shouldn't touch it. Would be hugely damaging to the client, right?
Yeah.
Right, hugely damaging. So that's the most important thing, because as a professional coach, we always listen to the life-altering, paradigm-shifting keywords. So if you heard something like that, immediate actions, very important.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Next question is, are there any notable trends you see currently, or any trends that are coming into the coaching and psychedelics world that might be interesting for people to know about? Something you recognize being on the floor?
I'm thinking, since your audience is global, regionally, I have some updates, but I'm thinking globally if I have anything to share directly. So I think we are seeing a trend of many governments, many countries around the world, recently Canada and then Australia, are opening up their doors to psychedelics, especially from a therapeutic perspective, and also sometimes limited to the practitioners like psychiatrists. At the same time, although the coaches or therapists might not be able to practice it directly, that's a great news for us. The reason is that these professionals are specialized in therapy or psychiatry or whatever. So they may want to work with, like what Yannick said, creating our circle. So this is something that I see as a trend. The world is opening up more and more. And I also could confirm in Thailand at the moment, they have a the most notable university here, in cooperation with the government at the moment, is running a study specifically on psilocybin. And as you may have heard about, Thailand recently legalized use of marijuana, including the recreational use to a certain extent. And we also have a new government in Thailand at the moment, so we're expecting things to change. So I feel like there's a mass awareness being created around the world, and some pressure is being created, I feel. I might be wrong, but I feel like the governments are opening up and starting to see the value of psychedelic medicine. So I think that means it's a good news for coaches. Mm-hmm. Oh, one more thing. Oh, okay. This I like. This I like. Okay, so I think, I hear at the moment, I can't mention any names, unfortunately, but I can say this much with confidentiality. We found out that there are certain organizations currently are shifting from actual coaches to AI coaches at the moment. So I am hearing this because in my network, some coaches lost their engagement with certain reputable companies. So that, of course, poses a threat for coaches. It's going to be it can be made available for almost nothing, right? So then people will start thinking, but of course there are going to be a lot of people who would want to work with a human being. This is very simple. So I don't think we need to be afraid. We should be proud that our profession is growing. At the same time, however, if you want to come into the psychedelic space, there's an advantage, because I don't think a machine would really be able to accompany a client through their the nurturing needs or the human needs, really, especially psychedelic intervention. I strongly believe even integration, it requires a lot of emotional capacity. So here is a great niche in case if you're a little bit worried, you shouldn't. In case if you're thinking diversifying your profession, stepping into psychedelic may create new opportunities and also potentially stable opportunities. Yet again, I don't know the future, and I feel at the moment you're unsure about anything, considering what is happening, what is going on in the world.
Yeah, this is great. Well, we could spend a long time talking about AI. I just actually did spend quite a while talking with an expert from Germany, Rebecca Rutschmann, on another podcast, Coaching Uncaged. So if you wanted to check that out, you or anybody who's listening, it's fascinating. So we can only scratch the surface. But the thing I wanted to underline is I think you're right. The work with psychedelics will definitely be one of the last bastions, if ever, AI would be taking over the coaching world. I think it's generally coaches who work with AI who will leave coaches who don't work with AI in some capacity behind, or that it will become quite a niche practice to not have an AI assistant of some sort. I mean, we already do have digital assistants in terms of booking sessions or maybe creating content or helping us in some way organize our coaching lives. But I think the processes that are quite structured and have a clear methodology behind them that we could teach to an AI, that could be outsourced. Right, one of those personality type assessments that you mentioned, or strength assessments, could be done before a client is coming into the coaching with your AI associate. And you get a summary on what came out of this and a copy of the report, and then you take over. But I think AI replacing coaches entirely is going to be limited to the very clearly structured methodologies like grow-based performance coaching or weight loss coaching or health coaching of some sort. In terms of psychedelics, I think that's the quality of the space that an AI can hold is qualitatively very different than a human being. But yeah, resist the urge to respond to it, because otherwise we'll talk for another very long time, which I would enjoy. But for the sake of time, just a couple of more questions. Any words of warning for coaches who are considering working with or around the psychedelic experience?
Not really.
Maybe something you wished you would have known before you got into it.
The coaches, right? As a practitioner, I would say try to experience it. I would say. I would also say, Yeah, I think I would say not a warning. I would say it's more like look at your own self, where you are in life, and your own capacity to hold space. This is something I would say. I'm actually saying this based on my own experience. I remember going through my first few experiences and needing a lot of time. I even took a little break from my own coaching, even for a short while. I had this very strong need to look at myself really at a deeper level. And I saw myself, I would say for the very first time, fully, I saw myself becoming more and more and more comfortable. I think the emotions work at a quantum level and they influence at a quantum level. So when a client is experiencing certain energetic level of emotion, it influences us whether we like it or not. I found out how much it has influenced me as a practitioner in this space. And I worked on myself for quite some time and looked at myself deeply. And I would say when I got to a kind of a level, I felt I can be fully comfortable who I am, to come in a way like not conforming to the system that is controlling me all the time. So comply with the system and see that, but not allow it to control you. When you get to that level, I think because the client goes through that process afterwards. So energetically understanding how it felt like, because when you have actualized vicious awareness, that there's viciousness in there. This is a hostile world where we don't like talking about it most of the time. We want to be either politically correct or all of toxic positivity and all of that. But if we really go out there, this is a very dangerous world. Ask a therapist. They would say sometimes you're afraid of being with your client in the room, right? So you hear really interesting things, to be frank with you. So in that context, really having that sorted out for yourself in a really deep way helps the practitioner to come into the space and hold space. Coaching is all about space. It's not asking questions, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
That's great. Oh, fantastic. Maybe I skip that. We've heard things. Have you ever had to stop working with a client? I know your range goes a lot further, but I wonder, when's the last time you referred somebody to a different practitioner, or just simply said, I don't think I'm the right person to work with?
I can actually. There was a recent person working with me, and she's I think without mentioning any names, I can mention she comes from Mexico, and she has a very strong belief system about the metaphysical world. So she started working with me for 2 sessions, and then as we went into it, I realized that the depth of the metaphysical world that she talks about is such that it belongs to a specific education system. Like it's like something you learned growing up, and it has a religion involved and all of that. So I thought I am just too blind to even to be able to relate to what is going on with her. So I mentioned this to her and said that I don't know what you're saying. So I don't know a person who does this. So she found another person to work with after a little bit of time. So this is an example because I couldn't really relate to anything. I don't even know what to ask next, because she would say, this particular deity did this and something like that. So I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just like gibberish. Yeah. So this was one of the incidents, I would say. Also, I have had clients that I have referred to psychiatrists because I could not take the responsibility of the intensity of, let's say, their condition. It's too much of a risk for me to accompany them through a journey like that. So in this case, I refer them to psychiatrists, and that has happened numerous times, many times actually. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Lastly, feel free to think about this for a moment. Maybe it's very clear to you, who knows? But if you could take over, if you could have somebody's attention or the attention of a group of people, it might help to think. Not everybody in the world has screens, but now most people in the world have screens, or at least a majority. So if you could take over somebody's screen for a minute and send a message, this could be a specific person, this could be a group of people. What would be your message?
I can be as creative as I want, right?
You have a minute of undivided attention to whoever you want. And yes, you can be as creative as you want.
I will call myself in the time. I will say, it's okay. It's okay. And everything is going to be fine. Don't try to change a thing. Everything is just exactly how it should be. Be with the flow. I'll say that much. Yeah. I would need my own attention. Yeah.
I reckon a lot of people probably would want to hear that. And I personally find that super interesting. We don't need to start a whole nother conversation, but I remember, I think it was Alan Watts who really got to me in this respect. Because he was kind of making very light of like, why is everybody running around trying to change or better themselves? Like, you're already perfect. Like, why is everybody trying to improve? You know, just go with the flow. But then, you know, I got to me in a time where I got really into coaching, and the whole premise of coaching at the time, as I understood it, was to help people better themselves and improve and make a change. So really interesting to wrap our heads around, well, what really changes? Maybe my attitude towards change is the change. And if I relax into the person that I am, things will change, you know, paradoxically. So I just find that fascinating, because I know a lot of people feel like me and have a hard time wrapping their heads around, what? But I'm in coaching. How could I want people to not change? I mean, that's my whole business gone. Let's leave it at that. Fernando, where can people step into your sphere? If people want to learn more from you, where would you point them to so that they can, get in touch, get into your sphere, learn more from you, be around your spaces?
Great question. I think, okay, so I have this series of conversations I'm conducting on a monthly basis in a very reflective environment, where I welcome anyone and everyone into that space. It doesn't need to be just a coach, anyone. And in this space, we do Vipassana, but with a modern twist. In other words, we use lots of activities, conversation, little breakout rooms. It's an online space. And we create development for ourselves with absolute no expectations whatsoever. And I call them fire circles, and everyone is welcome to it. And I need to check in with my team and find out where it is hosted, where people can register for it. So what I will do is, I'll share the link with you. If you don't mind, please put it into any description so that one can find and join those fire circles. And I'm excited to co-creating with anyone who is curious.
Absolutely. We'll put all of that and anything else that you send us into the show notes. Fernando, thank you so much for making time. You've been so generous. I really like your vibe, and you seem to do amazing work in a really ethical, safe, considered way. And you're doing some things very differently to a lot of people that I talk to in terms of when you start the integration process, for example. So it's been fascinating to dig into your protocol and how you do things and how you approach the work. So thank you very much. It's been really inspiring. I'm sure many people are listening to this. If you're still listening, clearly they found it quite inspiring because we are more than 2.5 hours in. So just lots of gratitude your way. Appreciate your work, and please keep doing what you do.
Thank you, Anik. And also, if you don't mind me taking a minute, I want to share with you. Actually, you are an amazing coach. You see, you created few breakthroughs for me just during this conversation. So well done. Thank you. You also helped me to reframe some of the words I use. And it's such power, Yannick. Such power every time we connect as coaches and as human beings. When we hold space for each other, we create such generous possibilities like development, right? So you enabled me some development during this conversation, Yannick, and you also demonstrated beautiful holding space to me. Thank you very much for that. And also, I'm very grateful to those who clicked the button and stayed until this long. That's a big deal, isn't it? Right? If you stayed until here, big salute to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And Yannick, commend you with the amazing work you do. So after your colleague reached out to me, I Googled you a little bit and I found out, oh, this guy is a big deal. So I'm glad we connected. I'm so happy to see the amazing work that you do. Wish you all the very best and look forward to our continued co-creation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I guess if you're still here, we're friends now. So say hello, so we know that you exist. Always look to hear feedback. These are starting points to conversations. So take this conversation out there. Engage a colleague about something that you've heard today. I think it's so important we have these conversations over ground because it's going to benefit everybody involved. So thanks, everybody out there and in here. I appreciate all of you, and we'll see each other another time.